Hi everyone, Dr. Lakesis here. So for this video, and I'm gonna try to keep it to one, it's probably gonna be more like two. We are going to talk about the rise of modern standardized religion. And this started to happen, during the time of ancient Rome. And really, you have a number of different religions going on all over the world. And because remember, with ancient Greece, ancient Rome, even ancient Egypt back then, you have a lot of religions that are polytheistic. And polytheistic is they have multiple gods, right? So for after, well, not after ancient Rome, but in the midst of ancient Rome, and this actually started with, during the time of ancient Egypt and even longer before that, you have a couple different things going on. So, one, you have what we call the Abrahamic religions, which starts with Judaism, okay, and Judaism, or the Jewish faith, right? They're called Abrahamic because they start with Abraham. Abraham is the guy. He is spoken to by God when he's 99. And God says, hey, you're going to have all these kids and they're going to be the chosen ones, and, all sorts of things. I'm going to post a video that you're going to watch that talks a little bit more about it. But Judaism, and why I have this slide here, is that it's important to understand that Judaism and the Abrahamic religions all fall under the same kind of foundation of Abraham and those things from the Old Testament. So you have Judaism, and then from out of Judaism comes Christianity, which I'm going to talk about. And then Christianity becomes Catholicism, and then a whole bunch of other things, right? So we get later, Protestants and Calvinists and Lutherans and Baptists and Anglicans and blah, 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 right? But we're just focusing on the main Christianity for this one because it's at the early part of the Common Era, right? Or the, AD period, right? So Common Era and AD are the same. So that is when these start to develop. And then you also have, out of the Abrahamic religions, you have Islam, which I know for some of us in the US and Western society, that might be a little surprising to you because it seems so different from Judaism and Christianity, but it's not at its foundation. Okay. And then the other religious thread that I'm going to talk about is the Eastern religions, and how Hinduism then leads into Buddhism, and Hinduism becomes the the main religion of India, and you've got Buddhism as well in there. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead. The order of this PowerPoint is not how I want to do this presentation, so pardon me while I skip ahead just a couple slides. Ignore all that. I'll get to it. Cool. All right, so and let me move my face down. So before we get to Christianity and Judaism and Islam, right, our Abrahamic religions, in about 628 BCE in Persia, which is now modern day Iraq, Iran, that area, you have the development of a religion that is still going on today, that people still practice this, called Zoroastrianism. And it was after their prophet Zoroaster. And he was a real guy. He was a real person. And the basis of this religion was that there are rival forces of good versus evil in the world, and that it is their job to fight those rival forces, and the good is this aspect of paradise, and the evil is a satanic spirit. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Now notice, this is 628 BCE. This is 600 years before Jesus Christ is born. So just keep that in your brain. The Zoroastrians also had a belief in the anticipation of a final judgment and a resurrection of those who were the good. Again, very similar to what you see in the book of Revelations. Okay. Along the same lines, you have, so Zoroastrianism was a religion, or is a religion, pardon me. And then you also have what are called the mystical cults, which I know today our term cult has a very negative term. Back then, the cults were more like sects, S-E-C-T-S. And the sects were aspects of older religions, right? So some of the older religions, say from ancient Rome or ancient Greece. So this religion, Mithraism, were people who worshiped the god Mithra, and they believed in death and rebirth, which was similar to how Jesus died and was reborn. And they also believed in baptism as a process in that. And again, the idea of using water to cleanse oneself, that kind of leads to a type of rebirth, right? Again, very, very similar to Christian traditions that come later. They also believe that in their process and in their traditions, they would consume food and drink that were symbolic or were actually transformed into the flesh and blood of their god, which again is what happens during Holy Communion in the Catholic faith, right? When the priest blesses the host and the wine, that then becomes, it is transfigured, or what's called transfiguration, into the actual blood and body of Christ, is the belief. So these ideas are not new, and this is why I put this slide up here. And if you read the chapter, hopefully you read it and were like, wait, what? That's interesting. And part of it is not to dissuade anyone from any sort of faith or to convert or to change anyone's ideas. As I said in my in-person classes, it does not matter to me whether you believe in any of this, whether you have faith in any of this. But we are looking at religion, and I should have started this PowerPoint with that, so I apologize that I waited till halfway through to mention it. But when we talk about religion in this context, we're looking at it from a historical perspective. So these are things that we know historically they believed in. And it's really difficult not to see the influences from, say, Zoroastrianism and Mithraism in, Judaism, in Christianity, in other religions. And here's the thing. I know some of you are like, no, the Christians made it all up on their own. Well, that's assuming they lived in their own little bubble. And none of these people lived in their own little bubbles. There was lots of trading going on. There was lots of influences here, there, and whatever. So it wasn't like, the Jews are over here and, the Muslims are over here and the Christians are over here and nobody interacts, right? It's just like today, right? Everybody interacts. Everybody learns about other people's cultures. We're influenced by other people's beliefs and different customs and things like that. So, I moved to Pennsylvania and I learned about Polish customs of eating pierogies, which are amazing and really good food when done well. Now, that's something I would have never known, but now it's like, whoa, that's something I could eat, right? Or something I could make if I had to. And that's a, very silly example of the way that culture kind of affects you as you move about. So, Judaism is what they call ethical monotheism. They were not the first ones to believe in one God, which is monotheism. You have this earlier, but their aspect was, it was about acting properly and how to establish their religion, which is all laid out in the Torah, which is their holy book, which is the Bible's Old Testament. So if you didn't know that, there's a big little, interesting fact there. And one of the other things that's really interesting is a lot of people, when they think of people who are, who practice Judaism, they think of the, what we call Hasidic Jews, who are very, very ultra conservative. and that a lot of Jewish customs are very kind of weird and relating to like food, like you don't eat meat and dairy in the same day at the same meal. You don't do certain things. A lot of those, and particularly the ones related to like food and cleanliness, is because remember, they were living in a time where there was no refrigeration. There was no way to tell if your food was good or not. So some of these things were based on basic safety, right? Health safety things where the rabbis were writing this down. They're like, wow, our people keep getting sick when they mix meat and dairy from the same place. So they just said, don't do it, right? To save their people from, oh, I don't know, getting really sick and dying because you don't have the same medical stuff that we have today. Okay. Again, Judaism has a very, very long history, and it is the basis for what we end up with Christianity, which I have to rush through. It's sad that I have to get through 3 religions in 5 minutes. So, with Christianity, first off, most surprising thing, I'm going to move myself again so you guys can see. Most surprising thing when I tell people this, so Jesus was a Jew. Yeah, he was a Jew. And some people also say that he was a rabbi, which you could make the argument because he was a prophet, right? He was going around preaching. And so he was Jewish, and he was poor, and he claimed to be the Son of God, which was not too uncommon at the time. But when a poor person starts going around claiming that they're the Son of God, that becomes problematic to the Romans, who don't like it. So he existed during the time of Rome, and he preached the love of God and the love for each other. And the other thing that was so important about Christianity and why it spread so rapidly, it wasn't super rapid at first, but it appealed to a lot of people because unlike the ancient Roman religions, unlike even like Mithraism or Judaism, is that anyone was allowed. So in Judaism, one of the big things is that you are born into it. It is really difficult to convert to Judaism. Christianity and Jesus were like, no, we accept everybody. And they accept poor people because they didn't have really expensive rituals. So it was the first kind of universal church. And the term Catholic actually means universal. Okay. So the idea was that, sorry, my dog is sitting here wanting me to play with him. So the idea that anybody could be part of this religion was new and was really appealing to people who were poor and, you know, didn't like ancient Rome because it was really expensive and didn't like how they were treated. And Jesus said, hey, just love God, love each other, and you will be saved. And that's a pretty easy thing, right? The other thing about Christianity is that early Christians, we don't see a lot of early Christian art until the Middle Ages, which is a good, 1,000 years from the start, from Jesus to when we start to see like really early Christian art, because they believe that if God was the creator, how could we also be creators? Which kind of makes sense, right? And then they also didn't believe in religious idols, which you see in ancient Rome, right? You had all these figures that were like, here's, Venus, here's, Jupiter, here are all these figures. The religious idol issue ends up becoming a problem because later in the Middle Ages, they do start creating sculptures of God and Mary and Jesus. And this creates a rift later. It's called the Great Schism between the Christian church and the Greek Orthodox Church. The Christian church becomes the Roman Catholic Church that we know today. So that is what I have about Christianity. And it's very, very little because there's so much more that I could tell you. And again, Christianity, the major thing, right, is that Jesus was, a normal person. He actually lived, right? We have historical records that he was a real person, which also made him more appealing to regular people. Okay. So I'm going to end this one now, and I'm going to go back and start with Islam and then go into the Eastern religions. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.